All right, all right. So we are here to talk about the disruption to ecosystems learning targets. And I'm going to go a little out of order because the first one, as far as this slides presentation goes, is talking about the 3 types of biodiversity. And so it says, I can describe the different types of biodiversity. So the first is genetic. That is looking at the different genes in the gene pool of a population. So that is not looking at 25 different species. That is looking at one species. We're looking at just the white-tailed deer found in Harbison State Forest, and we're looking at all of the different genes. You know, maybe some of them have this color eye, and some of them have that color eye, and some of them have, are this tall, and these are that tall. All of the genetics that go into making that population and how they are different, because they are sexually reproducing creatures, so they're going to be different. That's the genetic diversity of that population. The more diverse, the more adaptable that population is, the more that population will be able to handle changes in the environment. The second is species diversity. When you hear the term biodiversity, this is probably the one that you're thinking of. Species diversity is the number of different species found in an area. It's what we were calculating basically when we were calculating Simpson's diversity index. We were looking at species and how many of each species was present. So that's species diversity. And then ecosystem diversity is looking at all of the different ecosystems. The more ecosystems there are, the more niches there are. And so therefore, the more room there is for different organisms to come in. Animals, plants, fungus, protists, bacteria, whatever, to come in. So those are the 3 types of biodiversity. Like I said, normally when you hear biodiversity, the speaker is talking about species diversity and you're thinking that, but there is also genetic and ecosystem diversity as well. The next thing is I can then talk about the benefits. Let's do that next. So I can list the benefits of biodiversity. There's really 2 benefits. Increases in diversity, increased stability. So the more diversity there is genetically in a population, the more stable that population is. The more species diversity you have in an ecosystem, the more stable that ecosystem is. So we can look at this at both the genetic and the species diversity levels. Also, when you're looking at that genetic diversity, you might have more unique genes. You might have genes that would be beneficial to other species. You might have genes that aren't doing anything, but then when the environment changes, that protein that they produce is now all of a sudden beneficial. And so those unique genes could potentially provide benefits down the road. The next is what we call ecosystem services. And this is all of the stuff that the world does just for you for free. So it's the water cycle cleaning your water. It's the pollinators pollinating all the fruits and vegetables so we have food to eat. It is all the plants producing oxygen so you have oxygen to breathe. And all of that's happening for free. We don't pay the bees, right? We don't pay the trees to make oxygen. We don't pay the clouds to do the water cycle. So all of that is free, and all of that is stuff that benefits us and other species. So those are some of the benefits of biodiversity. The more diversity we have, the more jobs that those species can do that benefit other species. All right, then the next is I can describe the major threats to healthy ecosystems and biodiversity, and there are 4 major threats. Habitat loss. And so habitat loss can be the complete loss of a habitat, like you go in and cut down a forest, or there's a forest fire that burns down the forest, or it could be the fragmentation. You have this nice big habitat and then you do a road down the middle, so now you have 2 small habitats that are fragmented. So either one of those would count. So that's number 1. Introduced species, which we also call invasive species or non-native or exotic. They come in and a lot of times they take over with exponential growth because they don't have any natural predators or competitors. And so they can outlive and outcompete and outsurvive the native species and push those native species out, decreasing diversity of that ecosystem. Number 3 is overexploitation. This is overhunting, overfishing, overlogging. It's removing more of a species than is sustainable. So if you remove too many fish and you take that population down too low, there's not going to be enough adults left to produce enough babies to keep that population, and that population can disappear and go extinct. And so overhunting, overfishing, overdoing any kind of removing a species from an environment, whether it's a tree or a fish, if you take too many, it can't bounce back. And so that's why that's bad. And then number 4 is global change. So global change can be it's changes in the climate or the atmosphere, or just the ecosystem in general. And most ecosystems are set up to support life, and when you disrupt that, you disrupt that balance, and they may not be able to support the same types of life or the amount of life or whatever as before. And so one example of this is desertification, where we have land that is becoming more desert-like. And as it becomes more desert-like, it of course can't support as much life because it doesn't have the water and the food and those kinds of things that it needs for life. So sorry, I had to check that real quick. All right. I can explain the role of humans in the biodiversity crisis. Well, humans are the ones doing habitat loss. We're the ones. Now, I know every now and then lightning strikes and you get a forest fire. I get sometimes it's not, but the vast majority of habitat loss is going to be due to human activity, whether that's cutting down a forest to build a farm, or cutting down a forest to build a house, or cutting down a forest to build a shopping center, or cutting down a forest because we need the logs, those kinds of things. Introduced species. These species, like this lionfish, it didn't get off the coast of Florida by itself. It didn't swim over there. It was brought over by humans. And this cane toad didn't swim his way to Australia. It was brought there. And sometimes it's accidental. Sometimes it's on, like Dutch elm disease came over on trees that were brought over from the Netherlands. That wasn't on purpose. They didn't bring infected trees over on purpose. They brought elm trees over because they needed elm wood. And now that fungus came with it. So it's not always on purpose, but it is detrimental. Overexploitation, obviously. Who's hunting? Who's doing the fishing? Who's cutting down the trees? It's not squirrels. It's not the deer, right? It's the humans. And so overexploitation is 100% human. And then global change. And this can be both. This can be human due to burning of fossil fuels, which is increasing carbon dioxide in the air and creating more greenhouse gases. Or it could be due to natural things like continental drift. So, like I mentioned earlier, India used to be down around Antarctica, so it used to be freezing. It's not the humans' fault that India moved up to where it is now, and now it's hot, right? Humans didn't do that. That was natural. So global change is a kind of a mixture of the two. I can give examples of things humans as a species can do. We can switch from non-renewable to renewable, so we can push for legislation and those kinds of things that encourage people to use more solar, more wind, more hydroelectric, and less coal-powered plants and those kinds of things. We can use less water as a species. There are some places that have had rolling brownouts, which are rolling blackouts, which when there's too much burden on the electrical grid, they will say, all right, this block, you're not going to have electricity for this hour, and they shut that block down. And then at the end of that hour, the next block goes down and this block comes back up. And then the next hour, the next one goes down and this one comes back up. And so it's called a rolling blackout. A brownout is where they don't completely shut off the power. They just decrease the amount of power that goes to each household for that hour or whatever. And so that decreases the usage, but it is controlled by the electric company. It's not a choice I'm making. It's a choice that's being made for me. And so sometimes humans aren't willing to give up their comfort and their wants for today to make for a better tomorrow. And so sometimes the government has to step in and kind of force that. So those are some things we can do. We can limit the amount of carbon dioxide and other emissions that industries put out. So things like nitrogen dioxide and sulfur dioxide that join with the water vapor to make nitric and sulfuric acid or acid rain. We limit the amount of emissions that companies can put out. So things like that are done as a group to stop or decrease the damage. I can give examples of things I can do. So let's find that list. I think it's at the very end. Let's go try to think. Oh, we also are conserving land as a species. That was another one I wanted to mention. Landscape corridors, biodiversity hotspots, creating nature reserves. These are sometimes called wildlife refuges, those kinds of places where humans can't go. Those are some other things that we're doing as well as restoration ecology. All right, so what can you do? Reduce, reuse, recycle. You can walk instead of drive. If you're going down to your neighbor's 3 doors down, don't drive. Walk down there. You can plan out your errands a little more intentionally so that you're not driving extra. You can choose to have meatless meals. You could pee in the shower if you want to. Turn off the lights when you leave a room. That's probably the easiest one, the one most people know about. Change the settings on your AC and heat. Unplug your chargers when you're not using them. Put a brick in the back of your toilet, not the bowl, the back of your toilet. Turn off the water when brushing your teeth. Put timers on your water heater and other electrical. A lot of people have like timers on their coffee pots and those kinds of things so that they only run at certain hours of the day. And get a water heater blanket. And there might be others that you thought of as well. And then last one is I can describe what it means to be sustainable and give examples of this in action. So sustainability is using resources today in such a way that they will still be here tomorrow. So we're not going to use them up. We're going to make sure that we're conserving them so that our children and grandchildren and great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren will still have what they need. And so that's what it means to be sustainable. And examples of this in action, examples would be reforestation projects. So when you cut down a forest, you go back and replant, or you replant trees somewhere else to make up for the ones that you cut down. Also using less water. So there's a lot of public service announcements, PSAs about water consumption and energy consumption. If we as a species can help each other, encourage our friends and family members to use less energy and use less water. And some of that's just education. I didn't know chargers pulled electricity when they weren't charging until I started teaching. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And so things like that, just educating people is a good way to increase sustainability. So just taking good care, watching out for your species, making sure that there are strict limits on hunting and fishing, and that you aren't going over those limits. So, enforcing those laws and those kinds of things are ways that you can promote sustainable development. And if you're really interested in sustainability, do a little bit of research on Costa Rica, because they really do have it going on. They've got a ton of things in place to ensure, because they are a rainforest, it's highly biodiverse there, and so they try to balance the needs of the humans with preserving all of that. And I think that's it. So if you have any questions about biodiversity and the benefits of it and how humans have impacted it and caused disruptions to the ecosystems and how we're trying to fix that, just let me know. Thanks, guys.